how can we spark engagement from apolitical people?
Well, you have to reach people where they're motivated. You have to reach people where, like, what gets them out of bed, right? Apolitical people, kind of by definition, are fucking insane. I mean, have you seen, look, like right off the bat? So with that in mind, I feel like it's a matter of understanding what their particular neurosis is, and in many cases, I think it's actually burnout. I think a lot of independent people are people who either used to care and now don't because no change came about, or they were taught not to care. I see this a lot, for example, a lot of conversations that I've had, for example, growing up in Los Angeles with apolitical black people. Being apolitical when you're black in America is, I'm just going to say it, a stupid fucking decision. But a lot of
Mm,
them weren't apolitical because they didn't care about racism. They cared a lot. They just didn't think that there was any chance of anything good happening for them. They thought it was a waste of time and effort. World's unfair, life's unfair, do your best while you can. You're going to die one day. Don't waste your time trying to change things in a system that isn't susceptible to change. Now, they were wrong. Their approach, their attitude there is empirically incorrect. It's provably wrong. But that's how they feel. So how do you knock people out of a state like that if that's how they feel? Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of it really is interpersonal, and a lot of it's also going to rely on emotional appeals. Logical appeals, if they were the name of the game here, then they would already be political, I think, most of them. Stuff that matters to them, stuff that they care about. Parents tend to be really sensitive about their children for good reason. This is why the GOP is fixating so much about child gender ideology, CRT, blah, blah. Because, arguing that a parent's child is under threat from something dangerous is kind of like an emotional shortcut to their support. And you can do that. I mean, we can go that route too. We wouldn't be wrong to at all, not even remotely. I think it's a reasonable thing to consider at the very least. You just have to work to understand what it is that would get them to care about something. There's no broad answer for that.
Do you think, in the event of a Trump or DeSantis victory in 24, or a Republican majority in the House and Senate in 24, are you confident in a blue state's ability to protect trans people from any sort of legislative onslaught they might levy?
Confidence is a strong word. I don't think that the Republicans have the ability or the support necessary to do any kind of like military crackdown on blue states if they win and the blue states pass laws they don't like. I think that what might happen if they get total control of the federal government is they might try to sort of legislate their way through this. Like they might try to defederalize to the extent that they deny blue states the ability to pass their own laws, in the sense. But I think that's a very time consuming process. And what's more, the judges that would run through would not all be red. I mean, even if the Supreme Court is still red at that point, which it probably will be, that doesn't mean that every circuit court judge or every like state judge or like state Supreme Courts or anything like that. Like we're talking long stretches of time with no guarantee for results. Now, if there is some kind of military crackdown, obviously we're fucked. But I don't think that's the most likely outcome. What I think is going to happen if they get a victory is that they are going to very performatively do a burst of bad things, and then it will slow down tremendously because their primary focus in office will be the same that all politicians have, which is to appease their corporate benefactors. Going after trans people doesn't actually do that. And I think that they might be slowed down a little bit because, it's a matter of like cashing the checks you've written. They can talk up a big game being Hitler 2.0, but once they're actually in the big seat, they're responsible for maintaining the, continuous GDP growth for the benefit of all them wealthy fucks who funded them on the way over. If they don't do that, then like that, there goes their support, the meaningful support. So will blue states offer protection? I think they offer time. And that's meaningful because I don't think the country will weigh continuously in favor of Republicans' behavior if they act that way after taking power.
When it comes to looking at right-wing propaganda outlets and networks funded by millionaires such as Fox News, PragerU, Daily Wire, or I guess everything that Ben Shapiro does, is it valuable to spend time and resources debunking their absurd claims in order to bring over either centrists but right-leaning people, or even people on the right themselves?
I think that there's enormous value in debunking them as long as you understand why you're doing it and how you're doing it and to what end you're doing it. For example, I've noticed that as the Republican Party has gotten more dogmatic about the reactionary politics, there's less and less need to fixate on the like technicalities, the specifics, the data, because they don't care. I mean, like it's good to be right, and it's good to mention it, you know, like I don't think you should avoid mentioning if they're just flat wrong about something. But just saying that they're wrong and providing the correct info, that's not really going to change that many minds, you know? You have to fixate on what they care about, which is strong emotional narratives. And if you can't do that through like an empathetic perspective, I think that you can do that by denigrating the people they care about. So if you denigrate, for example, Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro or whatever, I think that the vitriol that you bring to that, the negative energy, is actually valuable rhetorically, especially if you're making fun of them for being stupid, or if you want to be trite and, you know, trivial, ugly or creepy. And no, it sounds dumb, but keep in mind we're dealing with conservatives here. We're operating on their level, and on their level, you know, a lot of them are just making very base level intuitive judgments about stuff that they hear from very obvious propagandists. Either they don't care or haven't noticed. You have to say something to shake them out of this perspective. And it's often the perceived strength and infallibility of their leaders that give them this confidence. You know, Ben Shapiro being able to effortlessly debunk every blue-haired college student who talked to him at on a campus. That perceived invulnerability gives Ben Shapiro fans a feeling of, oh yeah, well, we can trust this guy. But tearing into him, I think it can disrupt their feelings there, as long as it's done well. There's a lot of nuance to that, but at the end of the day, debunking is very important.
Yeah, I will say the main thing that I want to do is bring over people who are centrist leaning, or no, centrist but right leaning, and kind of like pull them out of that before it's too late, or showing like people on the right, like, hey, no, that's not how things are. This is how reality is. I recently saw like a PragerU video about good little Chrissy Columbus, and everything in there was wrong, and just no. Not factual at all. And with all of these being funded by billionaire oil companies, is it the Koch's brother? Is that his last name?
Yeah, the Koch brothers. Yeah, well,
Yeah, the
brother
Koch
now, because
brother.
one of them is dead, right?
Brother.
Yeah, brother,
One's in
right.
hell.
Yes.
So yes, when it comes to debunking that, do you think that a group of people could necessarily stand up to all that money?
Oh, sure, yeah. Social media isn't perfectly proportional game when it comes to money invested. But you have to focus on it in the right ways. Keep in mind, the average person watching and agreeing with a PragerU video on Christopher Columbus isn't doing so because they know much about history, care much about history, or know much about Christopher Columbus. What they're doing is trying to assuage any feelings of aggrievement with accusations of systemic white supremacy in our country's history. Racists don't like to acknowledge history of racism because if you acknowledge the history of racism, you indicate A, that your glorious nation and people have done something wrong, and B, that there might be some kind of historical cause to modern day problems when it comes to disparities between different racial groups. So the real reason they're watching that video and agreeing with it is because they want to go like, like, yeah, they're see, America was already good. Them liberals always complaining, da 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 da. So the historical facts issue isn't actually how you get them. You don't go like, well, actually, did you know this historical text said this, that, the other? Because they don't know and they don't care and they don't know what's going on. You have to attack the core, the root of their position. You can ask leading questions. Why are you so obsessed with proving some guy who died 400 years ago did nothing wrong or whatever? Why, everyone knows Columbus was bad. Why are you so obsessed with defending him? Get them to explain themselves to you, I think you can get a lot done with that.